Welcome to the Noesis Interactive courseware on image effects. In this chapter we're going to take a look at a variety of image effects, including blur, noise, twist, bloom and flares, color correction, creasing, edge detection, depth of field, and a fisheye lens. To illustrate these effects, we're going to take a look at the windmill scene from our standard assets. Please note that image effects require a pro version of Unity. So let's take a look at our windmill scene. We have a few windmills, a camera with a rotation script attached, and a serene setting on the countryside. With our main camera selected, you can see we have no image effects currently attached to the camera. Let's hit play to see what the scene looks like without any image effects. Okay, so let's add our first image effect. First, make sure you have the main camera selected, then go to the component menu, scroll down to image effects, and let's select blur as our first image effect. You can see the effects immediately in the game view. And over along our camera inspector, we can see that the blur effect script has been added to the camera. Here we can adjust options such as how blurry the image is, plus how many iterations of blur we use for the desired effect. We can just turn off this script now to return back to our original camera. The next effect we should take a look at is the grayscale effect. What this does is it converts all of our color information to grayscale. We can offset the starting point of the grayscale. We can also provide a texture ramp to map color ranges to grayscale ranges. Let's turn this effect off now. The next image effect we want to take a look at is the motion blur effect. You'll notice in the game view that nothing has changed, and this is because the motion blur effect requires motion. So if we hit play, you'll see the effect taking place. One of the other options is to add extra blur, which simply blurs the motion much more than we had previously. Let's go ahead and turn that effect off. The next effect we want to take a look at is the noise effect. With the noise effect attached, we can achieve the grain texture that's commonly associated with film. Let's take a look at this now. Let's turn this effect off now. For our next effect, let's take a look at the sepia tone. This is very similar to grayscale, except we have sepia tones instead of grayscale. This effect does not expose any other options. For our next effect, let's take a look at the twirl effect. With twirl, we can distort the final image with a radius and also an angle of distortion. If we hit play, you'll see that we get a distortion effect as the camera rotates through the scene. Let's go ahead and turn this effect off. The next effect is listed under the New menu. Let's start with the bloom and flares. We have two options here. We can adjust the intensity of the bloom as well as adjust the intensity of the lens flare. You can also adjust the individual colors of the lens flare as well as the blur amount for the whole effect. Let's hit play now and watch this. The next effect under the new menu are color correction curves. With the color correction script, you can adjust the individual color channels themselves or selectively switch out one color for another. Let's go ahead and do this now. First, we select our key color, which we'll pick from the water. Next, we select the target color. Let's pick a dark red for this. And as you can see, our color shifts dramatically. For our next effect, let's take a look at the crease effect. The crease effect allows us to blur the edges around different objects. You can adjust the softness of this effect, the intensity of it, and the spread of it as well. For our next effect, let's select depth of field. When you turn on the depth of field image effect, you might get an alert message that tells you to make sure the bloom and flares effect is applied before the new depth of field effect. Otherwise, it will not work correctly. If you get this error message and are wanting to have both effects applied at the same time, then you'll need to remove them both and add them in the correct order. With the depth of field effect, you can set the resolution of your buffer as well as the quality setting for the final render. You have options to control your focal point as well as how much you blur the final image. Optionally, we can have the focal point be the center of the screen, blurring some of the foreground and some of the background, or we can have it focus on an object in the scene. And when we hit play, we'll see that it maintains this focus even through the rotation. For our next effect, let's take a look at the edge detection script and select our advanced options. Here we can adjust the edge intensity as well as the spread of this effect. One interesting feature of this effect is that we can draw the edges only, or something in between. And we can also blur the edges. Let's take a look at the fisheye effect. The fisheye effect is similar to the twirl effect that we used before, except that it blurs the edges of the screen more so than the center. With the sun shafts effect, we get bloom in the background, but we also get the added effect of having the blades of the windmill occlude parts of the light shafts. We can increase the radius of the overall effect or reduce it, as well as adjust the offset and intensity of our effect. Let's hit play to see this in full effect. For our final effect, let's take a look at vignetting. With vignetting, we can achieve an old style film effect of darkening around the edges, We can also separate some of the chromatic ranges and additionally blur around the edges of the screen. With image effects, you can stack multiple effects on top of each other. In this case, we'll take the sun shafts and the vignetting and combine those. For more information about image effects, please visit the Image Effects Scripts section of the reference manual.